各位好，欢迎收看凤凰卫视美洲台为您带来的天天话题栏目。在今年多达12人的这个初选竞争当中呢，脱颖而出的洛杉矶县检察长候选人霍克曼将冲刺今年11月的大选，挑战现任的洛县检察长贾斯康。在今天节目当中呢，我们就特别连线到了他。Hi, Mr. Hockman. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, with 34 years of experience in the criminal justice system, you bring a wealth of expertise to the table. Can you share with our viewers your motivation for running for a district attorney and what sets you apart from the incumbent?
Certainly. I'm a lifelong Angelino. I was born here. I grew up here. I'm now married 31 years, and I've raised 3 children in Los Angeles. And our current district attorney, George Gascon, has enacted the most pro-criminal, anti-victim, extreme policies in LADA's history. And as a result of those policies, LA has become much more dangerous, less safe. Violent crime has risen every single year since he's been in office compared to the year he entered office. Property crimes, which involve people breaking into your house, your car, your stores, they're up by double digits. Shoplifting is up over 81%. Hate crimes are up over 100%. Fentanyl poisonings will kill more 18 to 35-year-olds than anything else. We are the human trafficking capital of the United States. So I look at this and I refuse to leave. I'm not going to leave Los Angeles, nor do the people I talk to who have loved and lived here in Los Angeles. They want to do something about it. And doing something about it is basically taking that 34 years of criminal justice experience as a federal prosecutor, a U.S. Assistant Attorney General nominated by a President of the United States, confirmed by the U.S. Senate, being the President of the LA City Ethics Commission and a defense attorney, to bring that skill set to the DA's office, to bring back safety to the community, to each and every family within the community, and do it starting on day one.
Mm-hmm. Now, your opponent, incumbent George Gascon, has implemented several controversial policies during his tenure. What specific policies or changes do you propose to improve the criminal justice system in LA County?
Certainly. George Gascon, or for that matter, any DA, should only be resolving criminal cases based on 2 things: the facts and the law. What he has introduced is a personal political agenda. It says that violent and serious criminals should be let out before they've served their full sentences, and they should not be prosecuted to the full extent of the law in the first place. I could reverse that on day one. He has alienated the over 750 prosecutors that he's worked with. They voted actually 98% to support his recall. And instead, I'm working with those prosecutors. I've met hundreds of those prosecutors. Their union has endorsed me in this race because I need to learn from their thousands of years of collective experience to bring more safety to the residents of Los Angeles. So George Gascon has failed his prosecutors. He's failed law enforcement, that thinks he is much more interested in prosecuting them than partnering with them. And he has failed victims. He won't even send prosecutors with victim families who are confronting the murderer of their relative when that murderer is trying to get out of prison early before a parole board. For decades, prosecutors used to go with the victim families, and now he prohibits those prosecutors from going with those families. So I can change those policies on day one. He, for instance, says that juveniles, people under 18, should be able to steal just under $950, which is a misdemeanor, and not be prosecuted. And while I reject mass incarceration policies that would throw them into state prison for 10 or more years, they have to be held accountable for their actions. And things like community service, restitution, which is paying the money back, or a diversion program if they have a mental illness or a substance abuse addiction, those might be the appropriate non-prison alternatives, but they have to be held accountable for their actions.
Mm-hmm. Now, with your extensive experience as both a prosecutor and a defense attorney, now how do you plan to navigate the complexities of the district attorney's role, which requires both pursuing justice and upholding the rights of the accused?
That's what I've been doing for the entire 34 years. As a prosecutor, you build the cases. You build those cases working with law enforcement. You build them beyond a reasonable doubt. That is the standard of evidence. And if you have that evidence, you go forward with the case and you convict the person who's committed the crime. On the defense standpoint, you are fighting against the system. You are pointing out all the holes in the evidence, the failure to meet the government's burden. You basically cross-examine officers and test their recollections, test their investigations. Because I have these two skill sets, I will be able to build better cases, more fair cases, cases that actually go after people who have committed crimes and reject the cases where the cases do not amount to beyond a reasonable doubt. I will be the first DA in history that has not only been a defense attorney and a prosecutor. I will be the first DA that's actually prosecuted a deputy sheriff. I did it back in the 1990s when we went after deputy sheriffs who were stealing drugs, guns, and money from the drug dealers, but also am the co-founder of the LA Sheriff's Foundation and have worked with law enforcement hand in glove for the last 4 years.
Now we know the role of district attorney actually involves making tough decisions that can actually impact individuals' lives and communities. Now, how do you plan to approach decision making that ensure transparency and accountability in your office?
So the way you do it is you actually work with each of the partners in the office. Unlike George Gascon, who's basically not worked with his own prosecutors, not worked with law enforcement, not worked with victims, and not worked with the public. So I would actually get the consensus to make decisions based on just the facts and the evidence and not my personal political agenda. In fact, my whole campaign is about getting politics out of the DA's office, which is why I'm running as a registered independent, someone who will be independent of politics and bring that type of decision making into each and every decision so that the public can trust that that decision was based just on the facts and the law and not something else.
We know victims' rights are actually often overlooked in the criminal justice system. Now, how do you plan to advocate for and support victims throughout the legal process?
So I've worked with victims groups for years now, and I've understood and actually met with not just the groups, but the actual victims throughout the process. I've represented the victims in the process. So I understand how it's incredibly important that a DA's office make itself available for every victim in every situation. That we have a victim service bureau which exists in the DA's office, but it has been underfunded. It has been cut under George Gascon's tenure. We need to actually increase a victim service bureau so it can do that, reach out to victims at every stage in the process. And they will understand under a Nathan Hochman administration that they now have a champion again in the DA's office, as opposed to someone like George Gascon, who has abandoned them.
Thank you, Mr. Hochman. Let's take a short break and we'll be right back. 那我们先休息下今天的广告，广告过后呢，我们再来继续今天的天天话题，不要离开。感谢回来，在今天节目当中呢，我们为您邀请到的是洛县检察长的候选人霍克曼。Now, Mr. Hochman, one of the major concerns in LA County right now is the rising crime rates. Now, how do you plan to address this issue if elected? And with crime rates fluctuating over the years, how do you plan to ensure consistencies and effectiveness in law enforcement strategies?
Certainly. So the philosophy I embrace is one that rejects extreme policies. Right now, George Gascon has implemented what he calls a decarceration policy. That's a policy that says upfront, without regard to the facts or the law, that certain crimes and certain criminals will not be prosecuted because they don't accord with George Gascon's personal political philosophy. So I reject those extreme policies, but I also reject the extreme policies of mass incarceration. Where I come down is the middle, and I call it the hard middle, because it requires you to look at each individual case. You have to look at the defendant's background. You have to look at the crime committed and the impact on the victim to determine who the true threats are to our public safety and need to be behind bars, and quite honestly, the ones that aren't. If someone commits a crime, they have to be held accountable. They have to pay their debt to society. But often it is community service. It could be a restitution and paying the money back if they stole from someone. It can be a diversion program like mental health or substance abuse diversion programs that offer that alternative to prison. So I believe that the message has to be sent loudly and clearly, not only to law enforcement, prosecutors, and victim groups, but to criminals. Because a truly effective criminal justice system is one that actually deters criminals from committing the crimes in the first place, so that they understand that the line will be enforced. The line is the law. It gets consistently enforced. It gets enforced based impartially, and there are real consequences on the other side of the line.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can do this, the criminals will be deterred from committing the crimes in the first place.
Now, how do you intend to collaborate with local law enforcement agencies to, target high crime areas and reduce criminal activity?
Well, you do exactly that. You form that collaboration. Right now, for instance, George Gascon is not interested in collaborating with law enforcement. In fact, he recently appointed a chief of staff who actually posted on her social media during the defund the police movement, herself wearing a t-shirt that says the police are trained to kill us, calling the police barbarians and an occupying army. The DA cannot have that as his representative to law enforcement, as his chief of staff. Instead, the DA's office needs to be the partner of law enforcement, making them understand that if they bring a case based on the evidence and the law, the DA's office will consider that case and will prosecute that case to its fullest extent, as it pertains to the facts and the law. Right now, law enforcement is demoralized because not only is it a tough job, is it a dangerous job, but they build up these cases only to have the DA's office reject them and then find out the DA is more interested in prosecuting law enforcement than partnering with them. That can all change on day one when I'm district attorney.
Mm-hmm. Now, shifting gears, let's talk about another pressing issues facing our county, homelessness. Just as you mentioned previously, homelessness is often intertwined with mental illness and substance abuse. Now, how do you plan to address the complex relationship between homelessness and crime?
So a district attorney can't build homes, can't give jobs, can't educate, can't provide health care. But what a district attorney can do is be a partner in the solution to dealing with homelessness, over 70% of which is composed of people with serious mental illness, drug addictions, or both. So if you go ahead and you authorize law enforcement to go back to prosecuting what they call quality of life crimes, these are often small crimes where people are using heroin, where people engage in vandalism, low levels of violence. Right now, the DA's office passes on those cases. They decline it, not because the facts and the law aren't there, but because that's Gascon's personal political agenda. So I would go back to working with law enforcement to bring these people into the criminal justice system. But once they're in the system, the idea is to attack the symptoms as well, to get them into mental health treatment facilities, to get them into drug addiction treatment facilities. And if it requires in essence, the criminal system to do it, then that will be a very productive means of getting these people the help they need, because leaving them in the homeless encampments to fend for themselves is incredibly dangerous. Fentanyl will kill 7 homeless people in LA County today and every day going forward. So it is not only inhumane, it is heartless to actually do nothing in connection with the homeless problem.
Mm-hmm. Now, minority communities, including the AAPI community, have faced increased discrimination and violence. And, with recent incidents of anti-Asian violence making headlines across the nation, I think it's important to address the concerns of the AAPI community here in LA. Now, how do you plan to combat hate crimes and ensure justice for victims?
So I've been working in the hate crimes world for over 30 years. I come from the Jewish community, and the Jewish community learned a long time ago that the only way to actually accomplish something is to partner with the other communities that are equally affected, whether it's the Asian American community, the Black community, the Latino community, the LGBTQ community. And that's exactly what I have done over those 30 years, helping to get the hate crimes legislation passed in Sacramento. And as DA, I will work every single day to make sure that hate criminals, people who commit these actions based on bigotry against race, ethnicity, religion, and whatnot, understand that the line will now be enforced in LA County. Gascon has not been interested in enforcing those lines and sending a very clear message to hate criminals that their hate will not be tolerated anymore in Los Angeles County. I will send that message.
Mm-hmm. Now, in cases where hate crime statute may not apply, how will you ensure that bias-motivated incidents are still taken seriously and addressed appropriately?
So again, even where situations where they don't meet the elements of a hate crime enhancement, if hate crimes are, or if hate is part of the factors that led someone to commit the crime, those factors will be made known to the judge. So the judge can then evaluate that as an aggravating factor and sentence the person accordingly. But the idea is to make sure in the AAPI communities and related communities that they understand they have to report these crimes. Too often, part of the problem is that people don't think the justice system will work. And quite candidly, under Gascon, it has not. So people have been hesitating to report these hate crimes. They have to get reported. They've actually gotten additional funding to make sure the outreach is done in the Asian community and related communities so that people understand that if they are a victim of hate crimes, pick up the phone, get online, make sure that law enforcement knows about it and goes after those hate criminals. Those statistics are very important because the more hate crimes that are occurring, the more you can get resources to fight them. But if it's not reported, then you're not going to get adequate resources to go after the problem.
Mm-hmm. Now, finally, what message would you like to convey to the residents of LA County as they consider their choice for a district attorney in the upcoming election?
You know, this is an incredibly important election for people's safety and security. The DA basically is in charge of 180,000 cases, a $460 million budget, and the largest local prosecuting office in the United States. So people have to, on November 5th, you are given a choice. George Gascon has never personally prosecuted or defended a single case in his entire life. I've been doing it for 34 years and have prosecuted and defended hundreds of criminal cases. George Gascon's record of public safety has been an absolute failure as it pertains to violent crime, property crime, hate crimes, fentanyl poisonings, human trafficking, homelessness crime. I will bring a balanced, sensible, reasonable set of ideas and a blueprint for justice to tackle each one of those issues. And I will do it in partnership with prosecutors, as opposed to George Gascon, with law enforcement, which George Gascon has abandoned, and focus on victims and not put their interests second to criminals. Victims will have their interests placed primary, and criminals will understand that the lines of society are back and accountability is basically the rule of the day. So that November 5th election is incredibly important. I'd ask people to vote out George Gascon and vote in Nathan Hochman for the next LA County District Attorney.
Mm-hmm. Great message, Nathan Hochman, candidate for LA County District Attorney. Thank you for sharing your insights with us today, and we truly appreciate your time and expertise.
您正在收看的是凤凰卫视。